Taeho stared at the massive holographic display in the Galactic Military Academy study hall, his antennae twitching with growing interest. The blue light from the screen reflected off his gray skin as he scrolled through countless human battles. As a third-year military strategy student, he'd analyzed numerous species warfare tactics, but humans were different. Professor Ju-won had given each student a different species to study for their final project. When Taeho first received humans as his assignment, he'd felt disappointed. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely achieving faster-than-light travel a century ago. Most considered them primitive, relying on projectile weapons and crude armor even in space. Still obsessing over those primates, his classmate Min-ki dropped into the seat next to him, setting down a steaming cup of nutrient broth. "You've been here since morning. Look at this." Taeho pointed to a battle recording labeled Battle of Agincourt. These humans were outnumbered 5-1. Their enemies had superior armor, weapons, and training. Yet they won. Min-ki leaned closer, his 4 eyes narrowing. "Probably just luck." "That's what I thought too." Taeho pulled up another recording. "Until I found hundreds of similar examples. The Battle of Thermopylae, Siege of Vienna, Winter War. Humans repeatedly defeat superior forces." The study hall's ambient lighting dimmed as evening approached. Most students had left for dinner, but Taeho remained fixated on his research. He found himself particularly fascinated by something humans called guerrilla warfare, small units using hit-and-run tactics against larger forces. Professor Jaewon found him there late that night, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing various human conflicts. "Making progress, student Taeho." The professor's voice startled him. "Professor." "Yes, Taeho fumbled with his notes. "These humans, they're incredible. Their tactics defy everything we've learned about conventional warfare." Jaewon's outer eyes crinkled in amusement. "How so?" "Well, take this battle." Taeho pulled up the Battle of Cannae. The human commander Hannibal deliberately weakened his center, letting it cave in. Traditional doctrine says this should have been suicide, but it was actually a trap, allowing him to encircle and destroy a much larger army. "Interesting." Jaewon settled into a chair, her scholarly interest piqued. "And you believe this wasn't just a single brilliant commander?" "No, Professor. I've found similar innovative tactics throughout their history. They adapt constantly, create new strategies, even let lower-ranked soldiers make battlefield decisions. It's completely different from our rigid command structures." The professor was silent for a long moment, studying the battle displays. "You realize, Taeho, that your findings could be controversial. Many in the academy consider humans primitive, barely worth studying. But that's exactly why they're fascinating." Taeho's antennae quivered with excitement. Because they started as primitives, they had to outthink their limitations. While we relied on superior technology, they developed superior tactics. "Then perhaps," Jaewon said carefully, "you should prepare a thorough presentation. Something that cannot be easily dismissed." Taeho nodded eagerly. "I'm already working on it. I've identified patterns in human warfare that could revolutionize our military doctrine." "Good." The professor stood. "But don't forget to eat and rest. Understanding humans won't help if you collapse from exhaustion." After she left, Taeho returned to his research with renewed vigor. Something about human warfare resonated with him deeply. Their ability to achieve victory against overwhelming odds, their tactical flexibility, their constant innovation. It all pointed to a species that shouldn't be underestimated. As the night cycle progressed, Taeho compiled his findings into a preliminary report. His antennae tingled with excitement as he imagined presenting this to his class. He'd show them that humans weren't primitive at all. They were possibly the most sophisticated tactical thinkers in the galaxy. Little did Taeho know, his fascination with human military tactics would soon challenge centuries of established military doctrine and change the way the galaxy thought about warfare forever. The holographic displays in the Academy's military archives painted the room in an eerie blue glow as Tai-Ho pored over another human battle recording. His research had taken an unexpected turn when he noticed something remarkable, a pattern that challenged everything he'd learned about warfare. Computer, display battle of Stalingrad analysis. Tai-Ho commanded. The hologram shifted, showing a sprawling urban battlefield. Human forces, despite being outgunned and surrounded, had turned their city's ruins into a deadly maze. They fought building by building, room by room, draining their enemy's strength through constant harassment and ambush. Su Jin found him there, surrounded by floating displays of various human conflicts. Her 4 eyes blinked in concern as she noticed the untouched food packets beside him. "You missed combat training again," she said, settling into a nearby chair. The instructor wasn't happy. "Look at this," Tai-Ho replied, not looking up. "The humans call it asymmetric warfare. When faced with a superior force, they completely abandon conventional tactics. They turn their weaknesses into strengths." Su Jin watched as he pulled up more battles. The Winter War showed how Finnish soldiers on primitive skis outmaneuvered and destroyed modern Soviet armored columns. The Vietnam conflict revealed jungle fighters wearing simple black clothes defeating the most advanced military of their time. "You're obsessing," Su Jin said, her antennae drooping with worry. "These humans," Tai-Ho replied, "they don't fight like anyone else. Traditional military doctrine says you need superior numbers, technology, or position to win. Humans prove that wrong repeatedly." He showed her the Battle of Thermopylae. See, 300 warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands by using terrain to their advantage. They turned a geographic weakness into an impenetrable fortress. "But they lost that battle," Su Jin pointed out. "Yes, but they achieved their strategic objective. They delayed the enemy long enough for their allies to prepare. Humans understand something we don't. That victory isn't always about winning the battle." The archive's automatic lighting began to dim, signaling evening cycle. Most students had left, but Tai-Ho was too excited to stop. He discovered patterns in human warfare that defied conventional wisdom. "They're adaptable," he explained to Su Jin. "When faced with a stronger enemy, they don't try to match strength with strength. They find creative solutions. During their Second World War, they used inflatable tanks to deceive enemies. In ancient times, they used fire ships to break naval blockades." Su Jin's skepticism began to fade as she watched more examples. Their commanders must be brilliant strategists. "That's another thing," Tai-Ho said excitedly. "They don't rely solely on central command. They have something called mission-type tactics, where even low-ranking soldiers can make important decisions based on the situation." He pulled up a recent space battle where a human vessel, despite being damaged and outgunned, had defeated 3 enemy ships by hiding in an asteroid field and picking them off one by one. "They're taking these same principles into space warfare," he explained. "While we focus on building bigger ships with more powerful weapons, they're developing tactics to neutralize our advantages." Su Jin watched her friend with growing concern. His obsession with human warfare was consuming him, but she couldn't deny the importance of his discoveries. The patterns he'd identified could revolutionize military doctrine across the galaxy. "You need to rest," she finally said. "You can't present your findings if you collapse from exhaustion." Tai-Ho nodded reluctantly, saving his research data. As they left the archives, he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd discovered. Humans weren't just another species to study. They were master strategists who had turned their perceived weaknesses into unprecedented military strength. Their walk back to the dormitory was interrupted by Tai-Ho stopping suddenly. "Su Jin, what if we've been wrong about humans all along? What if their primitive technology forced them to become better tacticians than any other species?" Su Jin considered this. "Then maybe," she said carefully, "the galaxy needs to start paying more attention to these humans." The presentation hall of the Galactic Military Academy fell into complete silence as Tai-Ho activated his holographic display. The massive screen came to life, showing footage of human battles throughout history. His classmates, a mix of various alien species, watched with their multiple eyes and sensory organs focused on the display. Today, I present my findings on human military tactics. Taiho began, his antennae steady with confidence. What you're about to see will challenge everything we know about warfare. The first hologram showed the Vietnam War. Dense jungle terrain filled the display as human soldiers moved like ghosts through the vegetation. Notice their movement patterns, Taiho explained. These humans don't just adapt to the terrain. They weaponize it. They turn the environment itself into a weapon. Hyunwoo, sitting in the front row, clicked his mandibles dismissively. Primitive jungle fighting. Any advanced species would lose. Taiho interrupted firmly. That's exactly my point. The technologically superior force lost this war despite having air superiority, advanced weapons, and better training. Professor Jaiwon watched from the back, her outer eyes showing interest as Taiho switched to urban warfare footage from Stalingrad. Here's another example. Taiho continued. Humans turned a destroyed city into a defensive maze. They fought room by room, building by building. The attacking force had superior numbers and technology, but still failed. The images shifted to modern space combat. And now, they're applying these same principles to space warfare. Watch this engagement. The hologram showed a small human vessel weaving through an asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while picking off larger enemy ships. But their ships are inferior, called out another student, Du-jin. Their weapons are basic compared to ours. Exactly, Taiho replied. Yet they consistently win. They've mastered something we haven't, the art of asymmetric warfare. He displayed a split screen showing various human combat techniques, guerrilla warfare, ambush tactics, psychological operations, and unconventional strategies. Humans excel at turning their weaknesses into strengths. When outgunned, they don't try to match firepower. Instead, they find creative solutions. They use deception, terrain advantage, and unpredictable tactics. The presentation continued with examples of human innovations in warfare, the development of special forces, the use of camouflage, and the concept of strategic retreat. Most importantly, Taiho emphasized, humans have developed a unique command structure. They call it mission-type tactics or off-track tactic. Even their lowest-ranking soldiers can make tactical decisions based on the situation. This statement caused a stir in the audience. In most galactic militaries, lower ranks strictly followed orders without deviation. Professor Jaiwon stepped forward. Are you suggesting, Student Taiho, that we should reorganize our entire military doctrine based on human tactics? Yes, Professor, Taiho replied confidently. Because right now, we're training to fight wars the way we think they should be fought. Humans fight wars the way they actually are. He pulled up his final slide, showing statistics of human victories against superior forces. Our rigid adherence to conventional warfare makes us predictable. Humans have proven that being technologically primitive doesn't mean tactically primitive. The presentation hall erupted in heated discussion. Some students argued fiercely against Taiho's conclusions, while others sat in thoughtful silence. Consider this, Taiho said over the noise. If humans can achieve such victories with inferior technology, imagine what they could do with our advanced weapons and ships. They're not just surviving in the galaxy, they're revolutionizing warfare itself. As the presentation ended, Professor Jaiwon nodded approvingly, while students filed out, still debating heatedly. Su-jin approached Taiho with pride in her eyes. You've started something big, she said quietly. Looking at his fellow students' agitated faces, Taiho realized she was right. His research hadn't just uncovered human military tactics, it had challenged the foundation of galactic military doctrine itself. The Academy's simulation chamber hummed to life as students took their positions at the control stations. Professor Jaiwon had organized a special combat simulation to test Taiho's theories about human warfare. The massive holographic display showed two fleets, Taho's forces in blue, and Hyunwoo's conventional galactic forces in red. Standard simulation rules apply, Professor Jai-won announced. Each team has equal resources. The objective is complete defeat of the opposing force. Hyunwoo's fleet arranged itself in traditional galactic formations, a powerful central battle group supported by fighter screens and support vessels. It was a tried-and-tested formation that had served spacefaring races for centuries. Begin simulation, the professor commanded. Instead of matching the conventional formation, Taho split his forces into small mobile groups. His main fleet appeared to retreat, leaving behind what looked like damaged ships. Running away already? Hyunwoo clicked his mandibles in amusement. But Taho was implementing a strategy he'd learned from human naval warfare. The seemingly damaged ships were actually decoys, rigged with powerful explosives. As Hyunwoo's forces moved to finish off the easy targets, Taho's scattered groups began striking from multiple angles. Multiple contacts. Hyunwoo's sensor operator called out. They're coming from the asteroid field. Taho had hidden his squadrons in the debris field, using the rocks as cover. Small, agile ships darted out to strike at Hyunwoo's formation before disappearing again into the asteroids. Focus fire on their main fleet, Hyunwoo ordered, but there was no main fleet to target. Taho's forces remained dispersed, striking and fading away, slowly picking apart the rigid galactic formation. The decoy ships detonated when Hyunwoo's forces got close, creating chaos in their neat formations. Through the chaos, Taho's ships attacked from blind spots and unexpected vectors, targeting crucial support ships and communication nodes. This isn't proper space combat, Hyunwoo protested as another of his squadrons fell into disarray. There is no proper combat, Taho responded, quoting the human military manual. There is only winning and losing. The simulation continued for another hour. Hyunwoo's superior ships found themselves increasingly isolated and surrounded. Without their support vessels, and with their communications disrupted, the mighty capital ships became vulnerable targets. Professor Jai-won watched with growing interest as Taho employed one human tactic after another. His forces used electromagnetic pulses to blind enemy sensors, conducted fake attacks to divide attention, and even used the stellar radiation from a nearby star to mask their movements. Simulation complete, the computer announced. Blue force victory. Red force destruction. 89%. Blue force losses. 41%. The chamber fell silent as the final statistics displayed. Taho had achieved victory, while losing less than half his forces against a theoretically superior opponent. This proves nothing, Hyunwoo insisted, his antennae twitching in agitation. Real combat isn't like this. Actually, Professor Jai-won interjected, historical data shows this is exactly how humans fight. They rarely seek direct confrontation with superior forces. Instead, they create conditions where their superior tactics overcome technological disadvantages. The professor turned to address the whole class. Today's simulation demonstrates why we must study human military doctrine. Their unconventional thinking has turned them from primitive newcomers into a force that could potentially challenge any species in the galaxy. As students filed out of the simulation chamber, many gave Taho thoughtful looks. He had done more than win a training exercise. He had shown them a completely new way of thinking about warfare. Soo-jin approached him after the simulation. The way you used those decoys, that was from the human Second World War, wasn't it? Taho nodded. Operation Fortitude. The humans fooled their enemies about where they would invade using inflatable tanks and fake radio traffic. Today, we used damaged-looking ships, but the principle was the same. Looking at the final battle statistics, Taho felt a deep satisfaction. He had proven that human tactics weren't just historical curiosities. They were a revolution in military thinking that the galaxy wasn't prepared for. The Academy's Grand Lecture Hall was packed. After the stunning simulation results, every student and several professors had gathered to hear Taiho's final analysis of human military tactics. Humans think differently, Taiho began, standing before the massive holographic display. Their entire approach to warfare challenges our basic assumptions. He displayed footage from various human conflicts, focusing on small unit actions. Look at this Earth conflict called the Battle of Ia Drang. The human commander found his forces surrounded and outnumbered. Instead of following standard doctrine and surrendering, he ordered his troops to get as close as possible to the enemy. Murmurs filled the hall. Getting closer to a superior force seemed suicidal. Their air support couldn't bomb the enemy without risking friendly casualties, Taiho explained. By moving closer, the humans nullified their enemy's numerical advantage. This is what they call getting in the enemy's pocket, turning a disadvantage into an advantage through unconventional thinking. Professor Jaiwan stepped forward. And what makes this approach possible? Initiative, Taiho answered. Each human soldier, from the lowest rank up, is trained to think and make decisions. They have a concept called commander's intent. As long as soldiers understand the mission's goal, they can adapt their tactics to achieve it. He showed another battle recording, this time from a recent space skirmish. Here, a human patrol vessel encountered 3 pirate ships. Instead of retreating or waiting for reinforcements, they charged straight at the enemy. The class watched as the small human ship dove between the pirate vessels, causing them to hold their fire to avoid hitting each other. The human ship then picked them off one by one. The human commander realized that close combat would prevent the pirates from using their superior numbers effectively. This decision wasn't in any manual. It came from understanding the situation and thinking creatively. A student raised their hand. But surely this makes their forces unreliable. Without strict control, how can they coordinate? Taiho smiled. That's their greatest strength. Human forces are like water. They flow around obstacles, find unexpected paths, and adapt to any situation. While we rely on rigid formations and preset responses, they create new solutions for each challenge. He switched to a strategic display showing a prolonged campaign. They'll even deliberately lose battles to win wars. In this conflict, human forces retreated for thousands of kilometers, sacrificing territory. But they were drawing their enemy into a trap, stretching their supply lines until they couldn't function. Professor Jiwon nodded. And what else makes humans unique? Their unpredictability, Taiho replied. Just when you think you understand their tactics, they innovate something new. They turn their ships' waste heat into sensor bafflers. They use civilian mining ships as improvised warships. Every defeat teaches them new ways to fight. The holographic display showed a timeline of human military evolution, from ancient spears to modern space warfare. Most importantly, they never stop learning, never stop adapting. Each generation builds on the lessons of the past while developing new solutions for the future. A profound silence fell over the hall as the implications sank in. The galaxy's military forces had spent centuries perfecting standardized tactics and responses. Humans had spent that same time learning to be unpredictable. We see their limited technology and think them primitive, Taiho concluded. But their greatest weapons aren't their ships or guns. It's their ability to think differently, to adapt, to turn their weaknesses into strengths. In studying humans, we're no tactics. We're learning a new way to think about warfare itself. As the presentation ended, Professor Jaiwan addressed the class. Students, what you've seen today will be included in next year's curriculum. The galaxy is changing, and we must change with it. Taiho gathered his data crystals, aware that his research had done more than reveal human tactics. It had challenged the very foundations of galactic military thinking. And somewhere out there, humans were probably already developing new strategies that would surprise them all over again. The Galactic Military Academy underwent a complete transformation in the months following Taiho's groundbreaking presentation. The ancient halls that once echoed with traditional military doctrines now buzzed with discussions of human warfare tactics. Holographic displays showed Earth's historical battles, from ancient conflicts to modern space engagements. Professor Jawan had implemented sweeping changes to the curriculum. The study of human military history is now mandatory for all students, she announced to a packed auditorium. We can no longer ignore their tactical innovations. Tai-ho watched from his new office as first-year students pored over Battle of Canna simulations. The academy had offered him a position as a specialist instructor immediately after graduation, something unprecedented for such a young graduate. I still can't believe how much has changed, Soo-jin said, visiting him during break period. She had also joined the academy staff, teaching advanced fleet formations. Remember when everyone thought humans were primitive? Tai-ho smiled, adjusting his teaching robes. Now they're scrambling to understand human tactics. Yesterday, I had a class of senior officers asking about something humans call asymmetric warfare. The Academy's training simulations had been completely redesigned. Instead of focusing on overwhelming force and superior technology, students now learned adaptability and creative problem-solving. Combat exercises emphasized individual initiative and unconventional thinking. Why do you think humans developed such effective tactics? Soo-jin asked, watching cadets run a guerrilla warfare simulation. Because they had to, Tai-ho replied, his antennae moving thoughtfully. When you start as the underdog, you learn to fight smarter, not harder. Humans spent their entire history fighting against superior forces. It taught them to think differently. Word of Tai-ho's research spread beyond the academy. The Galactic Military Council requested a full presentation of his findings. High-ranking officers from various species gathered to hear how a supposedly primitive race had revolutionized warfare. The humans have shown us our own limitations, Tai-ho explained to the council. We became complacent, relying on technological superiority. They reminded us that warfare is ultimately about innovation and adaptation. The council's conclusion was unanimous. Human tactical doctrine would become the foundation for a new era of galactic warfare. Training programs across the galaxy began incorporating human military history and strategy. Tai-ho's original research station in the Academy Library became a popular spot for students. They would gather there, discussing famous human battles and analyzing their brilliant strategies. It's ironic, he told Soo-jin one evening, watching the sunset from the Academy's observation deck. We thought we were studying their weaknesses, but we ended up discovering their greatest strength, their ability to turn disadvantages into advantages. His research had triggered a renaissance in military thinking. Species that had fought the same way for millennia now studied human innovations eagerly. The term human tactics became synonymous with creative strategy and adaptability. And it all started with one student's curiosity about an unremarkable species. Tai-ho had not just uncovered human military doctrine. He had helped the galaxy rediscover the true nature of warfare itself. As he watched new cadets practicing human-inspired tactics in the Academy's training grounds, Tai-ho realized that this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, humans were probably developing new strategies that would surprise them all over again. The greatest lesson humans taught us, he wrote in his final report to the council, is that true military strength lies not in superior weapons or numbers, but in the ability to adapt, innovate, and think differently. In teaching us this, they have changed the face of warfare forever. The end.